Dojin, 23, a dominant alpha.
He's a rising prospect aiming for the world championships.
How ordinary. This man's future is already in our hands. Where is he now?
He has private training this afternoon. Seoulmuse University Gymnasium 2.
Let's stop by. That alpha needs to know exactly who I am.
A dominant Omega, from a powerful background family and a poor judo athlete. A dominant alpha on a university campus. Their relationship began with a single contract, but power tore them apart, and the alpha was erased from the world.
3 years later.
It's been a while. You shouldn't have come back. What remains between them is not love, but obsession, betrayal, desire, and a reunion that was never meant to happen. The arrogant Omega, who made a straight alpha, kneel. Extended author version series. The story begins now.
I-gyeol's life was monotonous. On most days, he went to school with his guards and attended his classes. More than anyone else, he hated having guards follow him around. But in the end, it had been his own decision. It prevented various troublesome situations from occurring. And more importantly, he believed some form of security was necessary. People often imagine the life of the youngest son of Seoulmuse Group, a rare dominant Omega, as a glamorous ballroom filled with dazzling parties. But the daily life I-gyeol actually experienced felt more like walking endlessly down a long, colorless corridor. The top floor of the office tel, built by Seoulmuse Construction, was I-gyeol's lonely prison. Through the wide glass window of the living room, the campus could be seen below, wrapped in a layer of mist. Sometimes he would look down at the students walking beneath him and feel a strange sense of distance. They would get caught in the rain, bump shoulders with strangers, sometimes cry over clumsy first love. But for I-gyeol, contact meant danger. At gatherings where corporate executives were present, the youngest son always had to sit neatly like a carefully polished sculpture. There was no need for him to speak or express his opinions. He was merely part of an elaborate performance where even the angle of his smile and the speed of his nod had been meticulously calculated. Even the subtle act of letting his attractive Omega scent drift just slightly into the air was part of that performance. It was Sunday evening. Every Sunday, I-gyeol returned to the main house. It was a grotesque gathering he was forced to attend under the name of family. Ridiculous. People who had no idea what kind of music their own son listened to late at night, or what food he enjoyed eating. Blind fools. Disgusting. Sitting upright in the back seat of the black sedan, I-gyeol glanced at his reflection in the shining window before turning away. His expressionless face looked like a perfectly crafted doll. The sight of it gave even him chills. The mansion deep within Seongbuk-dong carried an even heavier pressure than his penthouse. After passing through the massive gate and entering the garden, the carefully trimmed trees stood like silent watchers. It was the place where he had grown up, the place where he had been trapped his entire life. And yet, to I-gyeol, it had never once been home. The moment he stepped inside the house behind Seoulmuse's luxurious exterior walls, he was greeted by suffocating silence and order. At the head of the dining table sat Chairman Yoon Seok-ho, the absolute authority of the family. Next to him sat his mother, Oh Yu-ran, wrapped in a cold and elegant presence. As soon as I-gyeol took one of the two empty seats, heavy and measured footsteps echoed from behind. "I'm here." The voice was low, and the man who appeared was the heir of Seoulmuse Group, Yoon I-jun, his older brother. Despite being born from the same mother, two brothers looked nothing alike. I-jun was someone whose very nature suited domination and power. In the suffocating ecosystem of the conglomerate, he had grown faster than anyone else into a predator. I-gyeol, on the other hand, had spent every day beneath that shadow feeling as though he might suffocate. Every time he forced himself to wear the role expected of him, he felt like a foreign object in this family. Still, whenever doubt crept into his mind, he would notice the resemblance in the mirror. The same slightly upturned cold eyes he shared with I-jun, and he would once again realize the inescapable bond of blood between them. I-jun was a dominant alpha whose instinct was control. He always held I-gyeol's breath in his hand, carefully shaping his younger brother into the exact form he desired. "I-gyeol, have you been well? Nothing unusual? Well, you know me. Same as always." From the hand resting on his shoulder, I-gyeol could clearly feel the strange possessive desire hidden within the gesture. To I-jun, I-gyeol was not a younger brother. He was the most valuable asset the family possessed, and part of a portfolio that had to be managed without error. At that moment, their mother gave a small signal with her chin toward the secretary. The secretary approached carefully and raised a small measuring device toward the back of I-gyeol's neck. Beep! The dry mechanical sound echoed across the silent dining table. It measured his pheromone levels in real time, along with the remaining traces of suppressants in his system. I-gyeol clenched his teeth. Even at the family dinner table, he was not treated as a person. He was merely a product that had to be maintained in perfect condition at all times. Nothing more. His mother looked calmly through the graph displayed on the tablet handed to her by the secretary before speaking. The numbers are a little high. Perhaps it's time to change the suppressants, Mother said. Dominant traits were already rare, but among them, male dominant omegas were almost non-existent. Male dominant omegas were considered a type that required constant monitoring. Those born into ordinary families were often taken away before even turning 20, wrapped under the name of employment, and transferred as test subjects to the National Genetic Research Institute. I-gyeol had simply been lucky. He had been born as the youngest son of Seoulmuse Group. That was why he was allowed to live a relatively normal life instead of becoming a laboratory subject. But in truth, he was not much different from an experiment within this house. A personal doctor and genetic manager had always been assigned to him. Under the name of management, endless tests had been conducted. And since his trait awakened at the age of 7, the word freedom had been erased from his life. I-gyeol didn't even have the right to control the scent that came from his own body. His mother handed the report back to the secretary and asked calmly, "When is your next appointment with Dr. Kim?" "I have to visit once more at the end of this month. Then we should discuss the suppressant adjustment before next month's event." Sunday dinner was never a time for family bonding. It was closer to a regular inspection of a product preparing for shipment. Throughout the meal, his father spoke only about corporate performance and political marriage alliances. The questions directed at I-gyeol always circled the same topics. "Are you managing your pheromones properly? You aren't doing anything foolish, are you?" Because he had been born a dominant omega, the son of a chaebol family had to be perfectly marketable. Only then could he become a tool for strategic alliances that would bring immense profit to the company. His father was obsessively devoted to arranging I-gyeol's marriage. Powerful conglomerates already lined up outside the door, with numbered tickets, eager to claim the perfectly preserved dominant omega raised under the best conditions. I-gyeol, how has school been lately? At the question from his older brother, I-jun, I-gyeol slowly set down the glass in his hand. "Nothing unusual. I heard there's a promising judo athlete. Seo Dojin, was it?" The moment that name spread through the air, something deep in I-gyeol's chest stirred, just briefly, but unmistakably. His heart sank once before starting to beat again. During that fleeting moment of silence, I-gyeol carefully inspected his own expression. The slightest tremor of his eyelids, the rhythm of his breathing. Everything had to remain perfectly controlled. I-gyeol kept his gaze steady without moving a single muscle. "Is that so? He's requested sponsorship. The Sports Foundation mentioned him. His performance record is impressive. They say he has the potential to reach the national team." In his mind flashed the brown eyes that had looked down at him like he was an insect. The same eyes from the cherry blossom photo shoot a few days earlier when Dojin had caught the falling equipment on his shoulder. I-gyeol slowly moved the hand holding his fork. The silver utensil scraped lightly against the plate, making a quiet, chilling sound. "The Sports Foundation is also connected to Jungdo Group, so I thought it might be good for you to handle it." I-jun's voice was calm, but the command hidden inside it was as sharp as a blade. Jungdo Group. The moment he heard the name, the carefully arranged food he had swallowed seemed to rise back up to the pit of his stomach. Nausea spread through him. Jungdo Group was one of the few conglomerates in Korea powerful enough to rival Seoulmuse. From clothing manufacturing to professional sports teams, the Korean Sports Association, various athletic federations, sports marketing and distribution. It controlled nearly every part of the sports industry, especially the second son of that family, who practically operated the club and athletic associations currently working with Seoulmuse University's Sports Foundation. In the end, I-jun's proposal was nothing more than a pre-arranged marriage meeting disguised as business partnership. By presenting I-gyeol, the dominant omega, as bait, they intended to build a bridge into Jungdo Group's succession structure and seize the key to enormous profit, wrapped under the name of family. This disgusting transaction slowly tightened around I-gyeol's throat. "I understand." I-gyeol asked no further questions. He knew better than anyone that he had no right to refuse. Beneath the luxurious dining table, his fingers trembled slightly. To them, he wasn't a person. He was simply the most expensive piece on a chessboard that had to be placed in the correct position. The water sliding down his throat tasted strangely metallic, almost like blood. After finishing dinner at the family mansion, the penthouse he returned to felt colder and quieter than usual. Without turning on the lights, I-gyeol crossed the living room and threw himself onto the bed. Even the touch of the luxurious silk bedding felt strangely rough tonight. The city lights outside the window glittered brilliantly, yet the silence felt heavy. His stomach churned even more. For a moment, he considered taking a digestive pill from the kitchen drawer, but he had already built up a tolerance for them, and even that felt too bothersome now. Staring up at the ceiling, I-gyeol let out a long, deep sigh. The second son of Jongdo Group. He had never even seen the man's face, but he could already imagine what kind of person he would be. Another disgusting alpha who would calculate the numbers attached to I-gyeol's background and lick his lips at the thought of a dominant omega. It was a suffocating orbit, a life that followed a predetermined path, only to be transferred one day into someone else's display case. His chest felt tight with frustration. There seemed to be no way out of this suffocating trajectory. And at the end of that bleak train of thought, strangely, a name that had nothing to do with any of it surfaced in his mind. Seo Dojin. The name I-jun had casually mentioned at the dinner table echoed in his ears like tinnitus. The image of him flashed clearly. The way he had looked at I-gyeol with complete indifference. The way he had smelled his scent, frowned, and turned his head away. Seo Dojin. I-gyeol closed his eyes. Tossing slightly in the darkness, he murmured quietly to himself, "Ridiculous." The small whisper dissolved into the silence. The next day, through his personal secretary, I-gyeol received a file containing Seo Dojin's personal information. On the cold screen of the iPad, Dojin's ID photograph appeared. Short-cropped hair, like any athlete. Thick eyebrows. And even through the unpolished, expressionless photo, an unmistakable solidity seemed to seep through the screen. I-gyeol scrolled down slowly with a casual flick of his finger. Seo Dojin, 23 years old. Dominant alpha. Seoulmuse University Judo Team. The records were brutally realistic. A mother who had died 10 years ago. A father who had been bedridden in the hospital for 5 years. Despite a desperately poor family situation, the man had entered Seoulmuse University's Department of Physical Education entirely through his own effort. He was currently active on a professional team and was aiming for the World Championships, a rising prospect growing at an alarming speed, and currently ranked as the top candidate for a Seoulmuse Sports Foundation scholarship. I-gyeol tapped the iPad screen lightly with his finger. Aside from being a dominant alpha, this life is painfully ordinary. The man's livelihood and future, that thin leash, were resting in the palm of Seoulmuse Group. And whether he knew it or not, the first time they had met, the man had openly ignored him as though I-gyeol didn't even exist. To I-gyeol, that cold gaze from Seo Dojin had been a completely unfamiliar stimulus. A strange desire stirred somewhere deep in his chest. Just once, he wanted to show him clearly who he was, whose land he was standing on. "You should know," I-gyeol muttered softly, "who exactly will be sponsoring you." After staring at Seo Dojin's eyes on the tablet screen for a long time, I-gyeol's dry gaze shifted slightly. Where is this man today? He has personal training this afternoon, at the university's second gymnasium. Let's stop by. There are a few things I want to confirm. I-gyeol slowly stood up from his seat and took the coat that had been hanging beside the table. The face of that rude alpha, the one who had walked past him as if he were an insect in the Cherry Blossom Plaza, rose once again in his mind. Hello, this is Seoulmuse. Thank you for listening to today's episode. This is the extended author version of the arrogant Omega who made a straight alpha kneel. If you'd like to enjoy the full story from the beginning, please start from episode 1. You can find it in the playlist and the links in the description below, so be sure to check them out. I'll be back soon with the next episode and an even more dynamic story. Don't forget to subscribe and join me. Thank you for watching.